Hi, Krishna Prabhu. Hi, Krishna.
Haribo.
Hi, Krishna.
Haribo.
Hey.
Jai. All glories. Yeah, I don't want to show my face because you might catch what I have. So we're all ready to go? Okay. Well, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It's such a pleasure to see everybody. And today we're reading one of my favorite verses or chapters from Canto 10, The Brahman's Wives Blessed. We're going to read this pastime on in Prabhupada's Krishna book because it's very cogent, and I think we'll enjoy hearing Prabhupada's commentary as we go along, and then I'll bring up some questions to ask in the course of our discussion. So, Gauranga Prabhu, can you kindly put that up on the screen?
Just
Okay. What we'll do is just pass the mic around. Everybody take a turn reading a paragraph, and I'll inject some questions for discussion once in a while.
Yeah, you can read from there. Okay, now it's finished. Yeah.
The morning passed, and the cowboys were very hungry because they had not eaten breakfast. They immediately approached Krishna and Balaram and said, "Dear Krishna and Balaram, you're both all powerful. You can kill many, many demons. But today we are much afflicted with hunger, and this is disturbing us. Please arrange for something that will mitigate our hunger."
Requested in this way by their friends, Lord Krishna and Balaram arranged compassion to certain wives of Brahmins who were performing sacrifices. Nearby.
These words.
Oh, sorry. Oh.
Daily lives. Wait, here.
These wives were great devotees of the Lord, and Krishna took this opportunity to bless them. He said, "My dear friends, please go to the house of the Brahmins nearby. They are now engaged in performing the Vedic sacrifice known as Pirasa, where they desire elevation to the heavenly planets. All of you, please go to them." Then Lord Krishna warned his friends, "These Brahmins are not Vaishnavas. They cannot even chant our names, Krishna and Balaram. They are very busy in chanting the Vedic hymns, although the purpose of Vedic knowledge is to find me. But because they are not attracted by the names of Krishna and Balaram, you had better not ask them for anything in my name. Better ask for some charity in the name of Balaram."
Charity is generally given to middle class, and Balaram did not appear in Brahmin family. Balaram was known as the son of Vasudeva the Kshatriya. Krishna was known as the son of Nanda Maharaj, who was a Vaishnava. Neither belonged to the Brahmana community. Therefore, Krishna considered that the Brahmanas engaged in performing sacrifices might not be induced to give charity to a Kshatriya in Vaishnava. But at least under the name of Balaram, we may prefer to give the charity to Kshatriya rather than to me, because I am only in Vaishnava. Being thus ordered by the supreme personality of Godhead, all the boys went to the brahmanas and began to ask for some charity. They approached them with folded hands and fell down to the ground to offer respect. Oh, earthly gods, kindly hear us. We're ordered by Lord Krishna and Balaram. We hope that we know them both very well, and we wish you all good fortune. Krishna and Balaram are tending cows nearby, and we have accompanied them. We have come to ask for some food from you. We're all brahmanas and knowers of religious principles. And if you think that you should give us charity, give us some food, and we shall all eat, along with Krishna and Balaram. You are the most respectable brahmanas within the human society, and you are expected to know all the principles of religious procedure.
All of the boys were village boys and were not expected to be learned in all the Vedic principles of religious ritual. They hinted that because of their association with Krishna and Balaram, they knew all those principles. By addressing the brahmanas as knowers of all religious principles, the boys expressed the point of view that when the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna and Balaram, were asking for food, the brahmanas should immediately deliver some without hesitation, because as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, one should perform yajna, sacrifices, only for the satisfaction of Krishna.
The boys continued, Lord Krishna was as Krishna Balaram is standing waiting, and you should immediately deliver whatever food you have in your stock. They also explained to the brahmanas when food is to be accepted and when it is not to be accepted. Generally, the Vaishnavas or pre-devotees of the Lord do not take part in ordinary sacrificial performances, but they know very well the ceremony is called Diksha, Asusampa, and Sautramani. One is permitted to take food after the procedure of Diksha and before the animal sacrificial ceremony and the Sautramani, or ceremony in which liquors are also offered. The boys said, "We can take your food at the present stage of your ceremony, for now it will not be prohibited, so you can deliver us the food."
Although the companions of Lord Krishna and Balaram were simple common boys, they were in a position to dictate even to the high-class brahmanas engaged in the daily rituals of sacrifice. But the smarter brahmanas, who were simply sacrificial minded, could not understand the dictation of the transcendental devotees of the Lord. They could not even appreciate the begging of the Supreme Lord Krishna and Balaram. Although they heard all the arguments on behalf of Krishna and Balaram, they did not care for them, and they refused to speak to the voice. Despite being highly elevated in the knowledge of Vedic sacrificial rites, all such non-devotee brahmanas, although they think of themselves as very highly elevated, are ignorant, foolish persons. All their activities are childish because they do not know the purpose of the Vedas, as it is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, to understand Krishna. In spite of their advancement in Vedic knowledge and rituals, they do not understand Krishna. Therefore, the knowledge of the Vedas is useless. Lord Chaitanya therefore gave his valuable opinion that although a person may not be born in a Brahmana family, if he knows Krishna or the science of Krishna consciousness, he is more than a Brahmana, and he is quite fit to become a spiritual master.
There are various details you observe.
All right, can we pause here for a moment? I have a question for you. What was it the cowherd boys failed to do that Krishna asked them to do? They followed all of his instructions except one. And they presented it very expertly, being concerned that the Brahmins would not take them seriously. They quoted various Vedic references to say that it was permissible for them to give food at this stage of the sacrifice. So my question is, what did the boys not do that Krishna asked them to do? Yes, Nitai?
So Krishna asked them not to mention the names, like don't mention our names because then they might not give you guys food, but they meant to head.
Almost, yeah. They said, don't ask in my name, ask in Balaram's name. Right, because I'm just a Vaishya, but Balaram's a Kshatriya. So they'll have more respect for Balaram. But the boys just blew right past that. They said, we're with Krishna and Balaram. And why was that, do you think? Any ideas? Well, there's no commentary that I could find on this question. Somebody, go ahead. Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, you have some good friends and they're pretty cool. You just say their names and then you get in, but the party or whatever it is, it's like, hey, I know Krishna Balaram. So
Well, yes, although Krishna told them, don't use my name. So it seems like either they forgot or they didn't care. What do you think?
They didn't care.
They didn't care. I don't know. There's no commentary on this that I could find. Just curious. Prabhupada Priya, is that you back there?
I was just thinking that for them, it was unthinkable to leave out Krishna, like, they're so attached to Krishna, how can you not mention Krishna, like dismiss that Krishna's also there, it's like, no, he's the main guy, like, yeah.
Inconceivable, right. Okay, other comments?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe Balaram also whispered something, not to forget Krishna as well, that we are not aware of. It's not written.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting possibility. All right, let's continue. Oh, we got one more back here. I don't know who is that raising his hand. Hare Krishna.
So the one comment which Srila Prabhupada in the commentary here is that they saw Krishna and Balaram as the supreme personality Godhead. So which is, even though he's a Vaishya, but the religious principle is also supreme personality of Godhead. They didn't say that explicitly to the Brahmanas, but Prabhupada comments that by implying that you should know the religious principles, they implied that because Krishna and Balaram are supreme personality of Godhead, you should offer them.
Right, they were just actually going on the highest religious principle. Okay, good reasons, all of them. All right, let's read on, Prabhu.
There are various details to be observed in performance of sacrifices. They are known as desa, place, kala, time, quantity, rabya, with different detailed paraphernalia, mantra, hymns, tantra scriptural evidence, agni, fire, learned performance of sacrificing, devata, the demigods, yajamana, order of the sacrifice, kratu, the sacrifice itself, and dharma, procedures. All these are for satisfying Krishna. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita that he is the actual initiator of all sacrifices because he is directly the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Supreme Absolute Truth, beyond conception or speculation of the material senses. He is present just like an ordinary human boy, but for persons who identify themselves with the body, it is very difficult to understand him. The brahmanas were very much interested in the comforts of the third body and an elevation to the higher planes of residence is called Svargapasa. They were therefore completely unable to understand the position of Krishna.
when the boys saw the brahmanas would not reply to them, they even with a simple yes or no, they became very much disappointed. They then returned to the Lord Krishna and Balaram and explained everything that had happened. After hearing their statements, the Supreme Personality of Godhead smiled. He told them that they should now be sorry for being refused by the brahmanas, because that the way of begging, he convinced them that one who engaged in collecting or begging should not think that he will be successful everywhere. He may be unsuccessful in some places, but that he should not be because for cause for disappointment. Lord Krishna then asked the boys to go again, but this time the wives of the brahmanas engaged in sacrifices. He also informed them that these wives were great devotees. They are always absorbed in thinking of us. To go there and ask for some food in my name, in the name of Balaram, and I am sure that they will deliver you as much food as you desire.
Carrying out Krishna's order, the boys immediately went to the wives of the Brahmins. They found the wives sitting inside the Brahmin's house. They were very beautifully decorated with ornaments. After offering them all respectful obeisances, the boys said, "Dear mothers, please accept our humble obeisances and hear our statement. May we inform you that Lord Krishna and Balaram are nearby. They have come here with the cows, and you may know also that we have come here under their instructions. All of us are very hungry, therefore we have come to need for some food. Please give us something to eat for Krishna and Balaram themselves.
Immediately upon hearing this, the wives of the Brahmins became anxious for Krishna and Balaram. These reactions were spontaneous. They did not have to be convinced of the importance of Krishna and Balaram. Immediately upon hearing their names, they became very eager to see them. Being advanced by thinking of Krishna constantly, they were performing the greatest form of mystic meditation. All the wives then became very busily engaged in filling up different pots with nice food. Due to the performance of the sacrifice, the various foods were all very defensive. After collecting a feast, they prepared to go to Krishna, their most beloved object, exactly in the way rivers flow to the sea.
For a long time, the wives had been eager to see Krishna. However, when they were preparing to leave home to go see him, their husbands, fathers, sons, and relatives asked them not to go. But the wives did not comply. When a devotee is called by the attraction of Krishna, he does not care for bodily ties. The woman entered the forest of Vrindavan on the bank of the Yamuna, which was verdant with vegetation and newly grown vines and flowers. Within that forest, they saw Krishna and Balaram engaged in tending the cows along with their very affectionate parents.
The brahmana's wives saw Krishna with a blackish complexion, wearing a garment that glittered like gold. He wore a nice garland of forest flowers and a peacock feather on his head. He was also painted with the minerals found in Vrindavan, and he looked exactly like a dancing actor on a theatrical stage. We saw him resting one hand on the shoulder of his friend, and in his other hand he was holding a lotus flower. His ears were decorated with lilies. He wore marks of tilak, and he was smiling charmingly. With their very eyes, the wives of the Brahmins saw the supreme personality of Godhead, of whom they had heard so much, who was so dear to them, and in whom their minds were always absorbed. Now they saw him eye to eye and face to face, and Krishna entered within their hearts through their eyes.
In themselves, they began to embrace Krishna to their heart's content, and the distress of separation was mitigated immediately. They were just like great sages who by their advancement of knowledge merged into the existence of the Supreme. As the super soul living in everyone's heart, Lord Krishna could understand their minds. They had come to him despite all the protests of their relatives, fathers, husbands, and brothers, and despite all the duties of household affairs. They came just to see him, who was their life and soul. They were exactly following Krishna's instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. One should surrender to him, giving up all varieties of occupational and religious duties. He therefore began to speak to them, smiling very magnificently. It should be noted in this connection that when Krishna entered into the wives' hearts, and when they embraced him and felt the transcendental bliss of being merged with him, the Supreme Lord Krishna did not lose his identity, nor did the individual wives lose theirs. The individuality of both the Lord and the wives remained, yet they felt oneness in existence. When a lover submits to his lover without any pinch of personal consideration, that is called oneness. Lord Chaitanya has taught us this feeling of oneness in his Shastaka. Krishna may act freely doing whatever he likes, but the devotee should always be in oneness or in agreement with his desires. That oneness was exhibited by the wives of the Brahmanas in their love of Krishna.
Okay, a question for you here. We know there are various relationships with Krishna, various rasas. What rasa do you think these wives were experiencing? Willow?
Gloria,
Pardon me?
like
Mantra.
Gloria, like conjugal.
Yes, that's right. They may ostensibly have been like parental feelings. Oh, these boys are hungry, let me feed them. But they had heard about Krishna and felt this longing within themselves to see him. So when the opportunity arose, they immediately took it. Does anyone who's read Krishna book remember another conjugal relationship Krishna entered with a woman who had never met him? Just heard about him. It was one of his primary wives. Rukmini, yes. So, yes, they came in this intense mood of love, which was quite jumbled with what they were doing, bringing food for the boys. But this was their motivation within the heart. Okay, let's continue.
Krishna welcomed them with the following words. My dear wives of the brahmanas, you're all very fortunate and welcome you. Please let me know what I can do for you. You're coming here to see me, neglecting all the restrictions and hindrances of relatives, fathers, brothers, and husbands. It's completely befitting. One who does this actually knows his self-interest, because rendering transcendental loving service unto me without motive or restriction is actually auspicious when living entity.
Krishna here confirms that a conditioned soul can reach the highest professional stage by surrendering to him. One must give up all other responsibilities. This complete surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the most auspicious path for the conditioned soul, because the Supreme Lord is the supreme objective of love. Everyone is loving himself according to the advancement of his knowledge. Ultimately, when a person comes to understand that his self is the spirit soul, and that the spirit soul is nothing but part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, he recognizes the Supreme Lord as the ultimate goal of love, and then surrenders unto him. This surrender is considered auspicious in the conditioned soul. Our life, property, home, wife, children, house, country, society, and all paraphernalia which are very dear to us are expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the central object of love because he gives us all this, expanding himself in so many ways according to our different situations, namely bodily, mental, or spiritual.
My dear wives of the brahmanas, that you can now return to your homes, engage yourselves in sacrificial activities and in the service of your husbands and household affairs, so that your husbands will be pleased with you, and the sacrifice which they have begun will be properly executed. After all, your husbands are householders, and without your help, how can they execute their prescribed duties?
The wives of the brahmanas replied, Dear Lord, this sort of instruction does not befit you. Your eternal promise is that you will always protect your devotees, and now you must fulfill this promise. Anyone who comes and surrenders unto you never goes back to the conditioned life of material existence. We expect that you will now fulfill your promise. We have surrendered unto your lotus feet, which are covered by tulasi leaves. So we have no desire to give up the shelter of your lotus feet and return to the company of our so-called relatives, friends, and society. And what shall we do if we return home? Our husbands, brothers, fathers, sons, mothers, and friends will no longer accept us at home, because we have already left them all. Therefore, we have no shelter to return to. Please, therefore, do not ask us to return home, but arrange for our stay under your lotus feet so that we can eternally live under your protection.
Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, My dear wives and brahmanas, rest assured that your husbands will not neglect you on your return, nor will your brothers, sons, or fathers refuse to accept you. Because you are my pure devotees, not only your relatives, but also people in general, as well as demigods, will be satisfied with you. Krishna is situated as a super soul in everyone's heart. So someone who becomes a pure devotee of Lord Krishna immediately becomes pleasing to everyone. The pure devotee of Lord Krishna is never inimical to anyone, nor can any sane person be an enemy of a pure devotee. Transcendental love for me does not depend upon bodily connection. Krishna said farther, but anyone whose mind is always absorbed in me will surely very soon come to me for my eternal association.
After being instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all the wives returned home to their respective husbands. Pleased to see their wives back home, the brahmanas sat together with them and executed the performance of sacrifices as enjoined in the sastras. According to Vedic principle, religious rituals must be executed by the husband and wife together. When the brahmanas' wives returned, the sacrifice was duly and nicely executed. One of the brahmanas' wives, however, who had been forcibly checked from going to see Krishna, began to remember him as she heard of his bodily features. Being completely absorbed in his thought, she gave up her material body conditioned by the laws of nature.
After the departure of the Brahmana's wives, Sri Govinda and his cowherd boyfriends enjoyed the food they had offered. In this way, the ever joyful personality of Godhead exhibited his transcendental pastimes in the guise of an ordinary human being in order to attract common people to Krishna consciousness. With these words and beauty, he attracted all the cows, cowherd boys, and dancers in Vrindavan. All of them together enjoyed the pastimes of the Lord.
After the return of the wives of Krishna, the Brahmanas engaged in the performance of sacrifices, began to regret their simple activities in refusing food and supreme personality of Godhead. They could finally understand their mistake. Engaged in the performance of Vedic rituals, they had neglected the supreme personality of Godhead, that appeared just like an ordinary human being and asked for some food. They began to condemn themselves after seeing the affection and working of their wives. They regretted very much that, although their wives were elevated to the platform of true devotional service, they themselves could not understand even a little bit of how to love and offer transcendental loving service to the Supreme Soul. They began to talk among themselves.
All right, now, everybody, let's read this section together very loudly.
Beyond this regulation of the mind, body, and the senses.
Very good.
Learned Brahmanas, expert in Vedic ritualistic performances, were properly regretful because if one does not develop Krishna consciousness, all discharge of religious duties is simply a waste of time and energy. They continue to talk among themselves. The external energy of Krishna is so strong that it can create illusions to overcome even the greatest mystic yogi. Although the expert brahmanas are considered to be the teachers of all other sections of human society, we also have been illusioned by the external energy. Just see how fortunate these women are. They have so devotedly dedicated their lives to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, that they easily did what is ordinarily so difficult. They gave up their family connections, which are just like a dark cloud for the continuation of material miseries. Women in general, being very simple at heart, can very easily take to Krishna consciousness, and when they develop love for Krishna, they can easily get liberation from the clutches of matter, which are very difficult for even so-called intelligent and learned men to surpass.
The Brahmanas continued, according to Vedic injunction, women are not allowed nor are they allowed to live as brahmacharinis in the ashram with the spiritual master, nor are they advised to undergo the strict disciplinary procedures, nor are they very expert in discussing the philosophy of self-realization. By nature, they are not very pure, nor are they very much attached to auspicious activities. Therefore, how wonderful it is that these women have developed transcendental love for Krishna, the Lord of all mystic yogis. They have surpassed all of us in pure faith and devotion unto Krishna. Although we are considered to be masters in all pure purgatory processes, We did not actually know what their goal is, because we are too much attached to the materialistic way of life. Even though we were reminded of Krishna and Balaram by the cowherd boys, we disregarded them. We now think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead simply played a trick of mercy on us by sending his friends to beg food from us. Otherwise, he had no need to send them. We could have satisfied their hunger then and there, just by willing to do so.
If someone denies the self-sufficiency of Krishna on hearing that he was tending the house for his livelihood, or if someone doubts his not being in need of the food, and is actually hungry, then such a person should understand that the goddess of fortune is always engaged in his service. In this way, the goddess can break her faulty habit of restlessness. In Vedic literatures like the Brahmana, it is stated that Krishna is served in his abode with great respect by not only one goddess of fortune, but many thousands. Therefore, it is simply illusion for one to think that Krishna begged food from the Brahmana. It was actually a trick to show them mercy by teaching them that they should accept him in pure devotional service instead of engaging in ritualistic ceremonies. The Vedic ceremonial paraphernalia is suitable place and suitable time, the different grades of articles for performing the ritualistic ceremonies, the Vedic hymns, the process of sacrifice, the priest who is able to perform the sacrifice, the fire, the demigod, the performer of the sacrifice, and the religious principles are all meant to understand Krishna. For Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is the Supreme Lord Vishnu and the Lord of all mystic yogis.
Because he has appeared as a child in the dynasty of the Yadavs, we were so foolish that we could not understand that he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Brahmana said, but on the other hand, we are very proud because we have such exalted wives who have developed pure transcendental service to the Lord without being shackled by our rigid opposition. Let us therefore offer our respectful obeisances to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, under whose illusory energy called Maya we are absorbed in fruitive activities. We therefore pray to the Lord to be kind enough to excuse us because we are simply captivated by his external energy. We transgressed his order without knowing his transcendental glories.
The Brahmanas repented their sinful activities. They wanted to go personally to offer their obeisances unto him, but being afraid of Kamsa, they could not go to Krishna and surrender into him. In other words, it is very difficult for one to surrender fully to the personality of Godhead without being purified by devotional service. The example of the lotus Brahmanas and their wives is vivid. The wives of the Brahmanas, because they were inspired by pure devotional service, did not care for any kind of opposition. They immediately went to Krishna. But the Brahmanas, although they had come to know the supremacy of the Lord and were repenting, were still afraid of being Kamsa because they were too much addicted to their activities.
All right, thank you. Such a nice chapter. So consider a couple of things here. Krishna was asking only for food, and the wives brought back food plus what? Their devotion, yeah, their bhakti. So they had so much bhakti that they said, we will just stay here with you. We're not going back to those husbands of ours. We'll just stay here for you, with you, and follow you and be in your association because that's all we want to do. So Krishna accepted the food and he accepted the bhakti, but he did not comply with their request. It seems a little unfair almost, doesn't it? He asked for food, they brought food. They offered themselves fully and he accepted them. But then he said, your service is to go back and deal with these husbands of yours, even though they're deficient in their understanding. So in this way, Krishna is keeping the devotee in their same position, natural position. This is a really important concept for us understanding Krishna consciousness. Tanestita Shrutikatim Tanunam Manobai, from the prayers of Lord Brahma we read earlier. He says that one can just stay in one's position and add Krishna. So that doesn't mean externally as much as internally. We may or may not be able to change our external situation, move into an ashram, practice sadhana with others. It's great if we can, but it's not absolutely essential as we read from this purport, or this commentary. Prabhupada is saying that Krishna tells the wives, go back to your husbands, you should be with them, you should help them with their rituals. And the Brahmins, upon seeing this, were, just as Krishna had predicted, very willing to accept their wives back. The wives were concerned that, look, we just told our husband, we just blew off our husbands to come here and join you. So how can you tell us to go back? But then Krishna says, no, it's all right. They will accept you. And anyone remember why Krishna said they would accept them? Because everybody loves a pure devotee. Yes, everybody loves pure devotees. As Prabhupada said, only an insane person would be inimical to a pure devotee. And indeed, that's exactly what happened. The husbands were very happy to have the wives back. They were very repentant about what they had done. And at the same time, they were afraid to follow Krishna themselves. So the wives proved themselves superior before, during, and after this whole exchange. So this is the lesson from this particular chapter, how it is devotion to Krishna that is the highest expression of Vedic culture, not any kind of, nothing else. Nothing else can compare with it. Even these highly educated Brahmins could not touch what their wives had. So any questions now for discussion? And please use the microphone so that I can hear you. Is that Prabhupada Priya? Questions or comments, please?
I have a question. So, yeah, comparing this to other pastimes, and Dhruva Maharaj went to the forest to try to find God, and he met Narada Muni, and Narada Muni told him, go home, and then Narada Muni said, nope, I'm not going home, I'm here on a mission, and if you're not gonna help me, then step aside. And that was glorious, right? He met the Lord, he, excelled in his devotion as a result of his determination. Then another thing is that when Krishna played his flute, then the gopis, they, similar to the Brahmins' wives, they left home, they, disregarded the orders of their husbands and fathers and sons and brothers or whatever, their family members. And they went there and same thing. Krishna said, oh, you've come here, but you have so many family responsibilities. Some of you even have small children you left, you should go home. But in this case, the gopis, they were like, no, we're not going back, and forget it. We came here to be with you, and we're going to be here. So, yeah, I've heard that actually, like the Brahmins' wives, see Krishna giving the same instruction to both of them, but the Brahmins' wives, they followed the instruction and went back home, and the gopis, they didn't. So I heard that the gopis' response was like a higher response, because Krishna's instruction was like a test, to test their determination, or whether they were really ready to give up everything. And the Brahmin wives, they weren't like quite ready, like the gopis were.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, a couple of things. First of all, the dharma for men and women is different. For Dhruva to stay in the forest was appropriate because he was pursuing renunciation. But for a woman to go to the forest and pursue renunciation is not dharmic, because woman has to be protected. But the Brahmins' wives obeyed Krishna's orders, and the gopis did not immediately. But they did eventually go back to their homes, didn't they? They didn't just join Krishna in the forest like, sannyasis. They went back as he had directed after the rasa dance, which lasts thousands of years, as we'll be reading next week. So the gopis' response was higher, because initially, at least, they refused to comply and Krishna accepted that. But the Brahmins' wives did comply. But their position was no less glorious, or not significantly less. Their rasa was different. They were already married to these Brahmins. They were established in their dharma. They were not part of the Vrindavan community directly, as were the gopis. So their relationship is certainly less intimate, but their devotion is equally exalted, just expressed in a different way. Is that all right?
Yeah, I'm wondering also, just as a follow-up on that is, because in all these cases, there's instruction either directly from the Lord or from the pure devotee of the Lord. But, it seems that sometimes we can get instructions from, actual authorities that we're not meant to follow, but they're just testing our determination. So how can we know the difference between a test and an actual instruction that we're meant to follow?
Mhm. We can tell that most readily by how much anxiety it puts us in. If it puts us in so much anxiety that we can't do our sadhana, then it's an over endeavor, prayasya, which is a cause of fall down. Srila Prabhupada was told this by many people, including his patron, Srimati Morarji. Swamiji, you're trying to do something so difficult, you should just come back. And he stayed on because he was never affected in his bhakti. So that's one criterion. Another criterion is, do we know for sure that this is the order of our spiritual mentor? Or is it our own mental concoction about what we would like to do for Krishna? This was a point I'd like to explore a little bit, because the boys were hungry. That was their initial approach to Krishna, wasn't it? They were hungry. Such a simple thing. So they went to Krishna and said, hey, I'm hungry. Could you get us we're hungry. Could you get us some food? So is this how we should approach Krishna with our desires? Okay, Krishna, I want to do this specific thing. Would you please facilitate it? But Krishna may have another idea. So this is why we need mentors to gauge. When I was a young brahmachari, I had this notion in my head. I want to go to Japan and distribute books. I'd never been to Japan, but it was wide open. I thought, boy, it'd be fun to go and establish Krishna consciousness in a new country. So my mentor said, he said, you'd have to spend some years learning Japanese, most likely, and rarely will people born outside of Japan be accepted. So I don't think at 19 years old, you're ready for this. So this is why we need both our own inspiration, but guidance. That's not to say that our inspirations are not important. And if we have the ability and we have the know-how and we have the blessings of our mentors, then we can take services for Krishna that create anxiety. And if that anxiety does not affect our sadhana, then we know this is Krishna's testing us. Is that all right? Okay, Chris. Oh, I see.
Go ahead. Go. Yeah, I just had a question. I just wanted to get some clarification here on this. Says one of the wives, however, who had been forcibly checked from going to see Krishna, began to remember him, and then being completely absorbed in the stuff, she gave up her material body. So does this mean like suicide? That she committed suicide? What is this?
It's a certain yogic perfection where one can self-immolate, essentially. And this was inspired not by her yogic prowess, but just by her conclusion that there was no purpose in living without Krishna. I don't know, some of you know George Harrison, the musician, and Prabhupada told him not to move into a temple and shave his head, but to write songs for Krishna. So he started to write something, one of his most famous songs, about Krishna, something in the way he moves. But then he realized people would think it's a gay song, so he made it she, and became so famous. So he wrote a song called What is My Life? Or What is Life, rather? What is life without you by my side? And it just sounds like an ordinary love song, but this is about, he's singing this about Krishna. What is my life without you? Who am I without you? So I just share that because it's such a nice example of capturing the ordinary sense of love that will appeal to the common person when it's actually being expressed about Krishna. So they wanted Krishna so badly that there was no longer any point in living. This happened to one of these wives and also to one of the gopis. as we'll read next week.
Okay, so some sort of yogic trance or state of mind where
There's just, yeah, there's no point in my living without Krishna. And that conclusion is so thorough that they stop living. I don't know if any of you have experienced this with elders in your lives, but many times old people will stay alive just long enough to see a certain relative. You know, somebody's coming to visit them, they'll come and see them, and then they die. Right? They hang on just long enough for that purpose. So you need a purpose to live. I remember when my mother, she was 100 years old, she fell down and broke her neck. And she was a real tough, you know, hanging on type of person, as you could probably tell. She would always find some reason to live. And in her last week or so, she just said, I can't live like this. And then she died. So the gopis were like that. I can't live, or this wife was like that. I can't live without Krishna. What's the point in living? What is my life without you? So intensely that she gave up her life.
so she did perish, she did die, or that's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Not, it wasn't a form of suicide, she didn't like.
No.
You know,
I just don't have any purpose to live anymore.
Thank you. I have another question, but I have to find the text.
Okay, how about on the other side there? Who's speaking?
Hare Krishna. Well, something about what just was shared with Krish. It says here that she gave up her material body conditioned by the laws of nature. Could it be also that her intensity of desire was so strong that giving up her material body doesn't mean that necessarily she left her body, but the conditioning of the laws of nature were not pertaining to her existence. And probably gives that example of an iron rod and a hot fire. When that intensity of desire is so strong, the iron rod becomes red hot and acts just like fire. So being in this world with that intense desire brings us above the conditions of laws of nature. So in that way, she might have continued her existence in her household, but completely liberated and giving up her material body in that way.
In the first Prabhu, the commentators specify that she gave up her material body. I agree that that phrase is a little ambiguous, conditioned by the laws of nature. What was conditioned? Was it her body, or was her giving up her body conditioned by the laws of nature? So it could be interpreted ways, but according to the commentators and their references, at least, she gave up her and obtained a spiritual body, and less sacrificial join Godhead. It's time to wrap up. Could I take another minute? I wanted to share with you, I wrote a poem about this as an offering to Srila Prabhupada. It would take about 2 minutes to read. May I share it as we close up?
We actually have an extra 5 minutes.
Okay. Share my screen there in the time. If not, then.
Sorry, it's this.
Share screen and then we'll.
Okay. Dear Srila Prabhupada, as Krishna once dispatched his friends to beg from Smarta priests, when you sailed west and needed help, you naturally turned east and asked some Pandit friends for men and funds to be released. Yet all of them ignored you and did not help in the least. As Krishna told his friends that beggars sometimes are rebuffed, you knew the Lord would send you help, and help came soon enough. It came from low-class people who were fallen, blind, and rough, and not from high-class smarta types whose egos were too puffed. As Brahman wives and not their husbands brought Lord Krishna food, it was these fallen souls who caught your missionary mood. While pundits criticized your flock as muchis, foul and crude, you knew the Panchatattva did not favor or exclude. As all the Brahmins' wives received much more than what they gave, so grateful were the youthful boys and girls that you had saved. They took your flood of love of God to Delhi and Bombay, and when your countrymen took note, they too drowned in its waves. As all the Brahmins' wives then chose to stay right where they were, for Krishna, not their husbands, was the man that they preferred. We wanted you to stay with us, your youthful amateurs, for how could we survive without your form and just your words? As Krishna told the Brahmins' wives to go back on their own to handle household duties in their pati husbands' homes, you told us all to carry on the way you'd always shown, with Super Soul and Guru in the heart. We're not alone. As all the Brahmins' wives agreed to do what Krishna asked, returning to their homes, fulfilling ordinary tasks, like you, we move ahead despite the smartas who, in fact, do nothing to assist, though they may claim to have our backs. As all the smarta Brahmins finally started to lament for disrespecting him for whom their sacrifice was meant, dear Prabhupada, you showed how spiritual intelligence surpasses smug and superficial smarta sentiments. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hari Bol. Look forward to seeing you.
We have one more question.
You have one more question.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
Okay. So in the last paragraph, say how the example of the Brahmanas and wives is very good. The brides were inspired by devotional service, but the Brahmanas were too much to the activities. So how come these wives got so inspired in devotional service?
I couldn't quite hear your question. Could somebody rephrase it? Your voice is a little muffled.
So in the last paragraph, Prabhupada says the difference between the Brahmanas and the wives were inspired in devotional service, while the Brahmanas were too much addicted to fruitive activities. So my question is, how did the wives get so inspired in devotional service?
Okay. In this case, there was a benefit to be a simple-hearted woman. You know, we hear about the Vedic Dharma for women, and some people want to try to impose it in the West, but it doesn't work because the men are so rotten, you know, in most cases. So the idea is that these women had faithful husbands, they were protected by their husbands, they were cared for, they were in a position to just keep their position, their dharma in some households. But because of their attraction to Krishna that they had gleaned, not from their husbands, but just by hearing about him, the spontaneous devotion grew. So it was spontaneous. And this whole pastime shows us that it is not the exclusive domain of one class or another to develop devotion for Krishna. So Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sadhu Kabunoi. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it said that love of Krishna is dormant in everyone's heart. And it's awakened. How? By Shravanam Kirtanam, by hearing and chanting. So that just hearing about Krishna awakened this dormant love. But their husbands were too busy learning their mantras and their rituals to hear about and understand Krishna properly. This is the whole reason why Krishna comes and does all these amazing things, right? All these incredible pastimes, so that we'll hear about him. Why otherwise would he take the trouble? And you know, what would we expect God to do when he descends to this earth? Would he just like, you know, go on Facebook and say, yeah, like, what's happening? You know, he would do incredible things that attract the mind and attract our attention. So Krishna's pastimes attracted these wives and they became pure devotees. Okay?
Can I add something, please?
Please do. Last word.
Yeah, that there are also these, the way that, so you're saying that they develop attraction and devotion to Krishna by hearing about him. So I heard that the way that they heard about Krishna, because it's not like they went out, you know, without their husbands and things. Culture was not like that, but these tribal women from the forest, the Kulinda women, they're very fortunate because Krishna does most of his pastimes in the forest. And, you know, he lives with the gopis, playing the characters, all that. So these Kulinda women would be around and they would see these pastimes, and And so what they did for livelihood was that they would collect flowers and different resins and, make incenses and fragrances and oils and things. And the Brahmanas needed those for their sacrifices. They needed flowers and incense and oils and things for the puja. So the tribal women would go to the homes of the Brahmanas with their baskets full of things and sell them. And the wives would come out and be like, oh yeah, we'll take these flowers, these oils, whatever. And then they would ask, have you seen Krishna? And then the people would tell, oh yeah, he was doing that day and that the other day. They would describe him. And these were just kind of like Rukmini, right? When the sages would come to the palace and describe Krishna. So just by hearing about descriptions of his beauty and his qualities and his pastimes, then they fell in love with Krishna, and their husbands didn't even know how it happened.
Thank you very much. Very sweet. All right. Good to see everyone. Have a wonderful week. Hope to see you next week. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.